A third of the books on a shelf are English books. Half of the remainder are Chinese books, and the rest are Malay books. A quarter of the Chinese books are torn. If 54 Chinese books are not torn, we're asked how many Malay books there are and how many books there are altogether. Okay, I think this is, going to be quite an easy one for you. You've done lots of similar questions already. All you need to pay attention to here are what are the fractions of? Okay, what is the whole? But let's start drawing and see how we get on. So we're going to draw one big bar, and this represents all of the books. We'll do it down here, give us lots of room. And in fact, we've only just read the question. I know that that is one of the questions that we're going to be asked. How many books are there altogether? So I'm going to mark that here. So that's question B. Okay. Right. It says a third of the books are on the shelf are English books. So we're going to divide this bar into thirds. And we're told that a third are English books. Okay, so let's put that in. So English, and I've done it like this. You could shade it in or whatever it is. Just make sure if you are going to write inside your bar that you're leaving space for numbers and things like that. I usually prefer not to write inside the parts because I want to put numbers in there. So a third are English. That's great. I've got that. And then it says half of the remainder are Chinese books. So what's the remainder? Well, the remainder is this part here. Okay, this is the remainder. We can mark that in just to be clear to you. Okay, that's the remainder that's being talked about here. And it says half of them are Chinese books. Well, this remainder, you can see, is split into half. There's 2 equal parts to this remainder. So that means that one of them here represents the Chinese books. Okay, so and it says the rest are Malay. So these must be the Malay books. And again, I seem to remember one of the questions was about the Malay books. And yes, A, that's question A. So I'm going to mark that in as one of my questions that I'm looking for, one of the answers I'm looking for. Okay, right, well, where are we? We've got that. It says that a quarter of the Chinese books are torn. So it takes the Chinese books and splits that into quarters. So that's what I'm going to do. This is the part that represents Chinese books. I'm going to split that into quarters. Now, before I did that, all of these parts were equal. And it's important to try and keep my parts equal. That helps me with calculations. So if I'm splitting this into quarters, I'm going to do so with all of the original thirds. Okay, so I've still got equal parts. Now, if you're paying attention to the whole, I used to have the whole split into thirds, didn't I? All right, it was split into thirds. Now, each third has been split into 4. Okay, so instead of having 3 pieces, I have 3 times 4 pieces, okay? And so I now have 12ths. And this is, you can see how equivalent fractions work, what's happening when you are making equivalent fractions with the denominator. So for example, if I had 1/3, okay, what have I split my thirds into? Each I've split into 4. So I've got 4 pieces for every one piece that I had. And that means I have to multiply the top number by 4. And so 1 times 4 is 4. So 1/3 is equivalent to 4/12. Okay, that's what you can think about whenever you do these bars, what's happening, so that when you're just doing equivalent fractions and working with the fractions without drawing bars, you've got a better idea of what's going on. Anyway, that's an aside. Let's get back to this. Right. What are we told? A quarter of the Chinese books are torn. Oh no. Okay, so I'm going to, I'll shade in a quarter and I'll say those are torn. Okay. And then we're told that 54 Chinese books are not torn. So that's the rest of them. The rest of them are not torn. You can only be torn or not torn. So this is the not torn, and therefore it has a value of 54, these 3 parts here. And we want to find out the value of each of these parts. So we can now see that if we divide 54 by 3, we are going to get the value of each part, which is 18. So 18, 18, 18. Okay, and if all of these are 18, because we kept everything the same, it's all 18. Okay, right. Now let's look. We've got numbers everywhere. There's no gaps. We must be able to answer all of our questions. So what is question A? Question A is how many Malay books are there? So this is this part here. Okay, so let's do question A. All right. What do we have to do to answer question A? Well, that's 4 parts of 18. Okay, so we could do 4 times 18. Okay, that's going to give us an answer of 72. But we also already knew that 3 parts of 18 is equal to 54. So you might also do 54, that's 3 of these units, plus 18. And then you're also going to get to the answer 72. Okay, there's different ways to do it. It doesn't matter. You can do whatever suits you. So whatever way we've done it, we have discovered that there are 72 Malay books. And we're asked how many books are there altogether. So let's do the calculations for B. And again, there'll be a couple of ways that you can do that. In fact, what I'm going to do is, because I'm not finished and I've just found out another bit of information, I'm going to write this in. I know that represents 72. We're asked how many books are there altogether. So maybe you can see at least a couple of ways that you could calculate that. So firstly, we've got all of these parts, haven't we? We've got 12 parts altogether. We had 3 parts to begin with. Each part was subdivided into 4, so we must have 12 parts. So if we do 12 times 18, that is going to give us our final answer. And 12 times 18 is 216. But the other thing we could do is we could do 72. Okay, we've got one of these original thirds we know has a value of 72. We could do 72 times 3, okay, which is actually an easier calculation to do, isn't it? We're just multiplying by one number, and that is going to give us the same answer. Okay. So any way you want to do it, it's actually quite an easy question. I think it's just keeping track, as ever, of what the fraction is a fraction of.